The following is a presentation from PokerStars.com. Last night on the Big Game, Phil Galfond showed his respect for Doyle by bluffing out the loose cannon with Doyle's lucky hand.
That's not going to be it.
Doyle, I did it. Took down a huge one.
But it was our amateur Bill Given who made one of the sickest bluffs ever on the Big Game.
Got a 3 over there?
17-5 more.
So I guess you do have a 3, huh?
We'll go to 28.
28 is the bet?
28's the bet.
Oh, boy, I don't see how I can throw this away. I have no idea. 28, right?
Yep.
Merry Christmas.
It's actually a stone cold bluff.
Bill lost most of his stack, but won huge praise.
It was a pretty good play.
And Phil sits over there and goes, that was a great play.
I think it was.
Phil Galfond just said it was a great play. That's all you need.
Well, that's good to hear.
Bill's on the ropes and up against a table of heavyweight champions. Can he answer the bell? Find out tonight on the Big Game.
This is PokerStars.com Big Game.
Welcome once again to the Big Game from Las Vegas. Alongside Joe Stapleton, I'm Chris Rose, and tonight some of the best players in the world have come to battle it out in our state-of-the-art poker room with more than $1.1 million on the table.
The guy in the 6th seat here is a quarter-century old but bought in for $500,000 like it was nothing. Phil Galfond currently stuck 27-7.
Aussie pro Joe Hachem has tested our math skills with his unique buy-in. He's up over $36K.
Last time on the Big Game, Scott Seiver walked with more than $250,000. This time he's off to a slower start, but still winning. He's up $5,600.
The living legend is back at work this week. 77-year-old Doyle Brunson is up $7,700.
And this is our loose cannon, Bill Given. He's a 27-year-old amateur out of New Brunswick, Canada. Bill has been staked the $100K buy-in, but after an aggressive but failed bluff attempt, he's down over $62,000.
Another Canadian is making his 7th Big Game appearance. Daniel Negreanu is the big winner so far, and he's standing by with Amanda Leatherman.
Daniel, so what do you think of the table so far this week?
Well, you know, this is like high-end poker. Some of the times on the show, we've got loosey-goosey action, but all these guys are really good, so they're all playing kind of high-level, 3-bet, 4-bet kind of stuff. So it's a little different, but you really got to appreciate it because it's really good poker.
I noticed something.
What?
You're a little bit afraid to bluff Scott Seiver.
You know what it is, though? I mean, I bluff so much on this show, and I know he watches it, so he's also not a guy that likes to fold a pair, and I never really seem to have one, but don't worry, I got a few
It's okay,
tricks
you're
up my-
afraid of him. It's fine.
I'm not afraid of him. I'm going to try to bluff him eventually. I just want him to call me when I have something once.
All right.
That's my goal.
Get out there.
Okay.
Here are your loose cannon rules. Each one's been staked $100,000 to play and keeps all winnings above the initial $100,000. The loose cannon who's won the most money at season's end earns a North American Poker Tour passport worth $50,000. That gets you an all-expense-paid trip to a handful of NAPT events.
At this point, leading loose cannon David Fishman is looking pretty good. One double up won't even be enough to get Given even, so he'll need to dodge a lot of landmines, which will be tough considering he's already hopping around on one foot.
Action starts on the cannon. Folds 9 high. Jacks for Doyle, who raises. 8s for Scott Seiver.
We've seen Seiver go crazy with less.
Doesn't go crazy, just calls. Hachem folds.
What's his name? Bill Winnington? Chicago Bulls, Bill Winnington? Canadian.
Daniel folds.
He was big, 6'10", I think. Trying to think of every tall Canadian I've heard of.
I think he was bigger than that, actually.
He was. He was a 7-footer on 3 of Michael Jordan's title teams.
And I thought you only did football and baseball.
And poker. Trey deuce. Brunson still best. Fires 3,000.
There are no overcards out there for either player's hand, which is bad news for Seiver.
Seiver calls. 6 of spades on the turn. Brunson checks. Seiver checks. Queen of clubs on the river.
Doyle may have missed some value on the turn, but Scott Seiver is a dangerous player to have on your left, and it looks like he might feel like it's safe to bet now.
Doyle does, 9,000.
Doyle's made up for the turn check with a big bet here on the river, almost the full pot. Against a lot of other players at this table, I think this would be a snap call for Scott.
Fold.
Should never complain about ace queen again, Doyle. It got there.
It did, yeah.
It got there.
While Doyle stacks his chips, time to go over the rules of the Big Game. Each table lasts exactly 150 hands. The action pre-flop is pot limit, then no limit after the flop. Blinds are 2 and 400 with a $100 ante, all of which is paid by the player on the button. And every player begins with at least 100 grand but can reload for up to $500,000.
It's amazing.
Must be amazing that 2 jacks held up.
Doyle folds. King, queen for Seiver. Raises. Suited connectors for Joe Hachem.
Joe's got position on the aggressor, and suited connectors are the kind of hands you can flop big draws with, which can make for some nice juicy pots in a 6-max cash game.
Hachem calls. Suited 1 gapper for Daniel on the button.
What I just said for Joe, ditto.
He's in. Galfond's out. Jack 4 for Given.
Can't fold.
Calls.
There you go. This is your pot, buddy. Come and get it. Flop something first, though.
That's key. That's key.
Tray 5, king, 2 hearts. Given whiffs
Slow play it.
and checks.
I know Given was in the blind and that he needs to see more flops, but you're practically burning money with a hand like Jack 4. It's very hard to flop a draw.
Seiver bets 2,800 with top pair. Hachem folds.
Daniel's whiffed about as hard as he can on this flop. Oh, grab your swimmies. Here comes a float.
Yep, Daniel calls. Given goes from slow playing to no playing.
1 street too late, Bill.
9 of diamonds on the turn. Second pair for Daniel. Seiver, though, still best.
This is a bad card for Daniel because Scott won't be affected by it. And if Daniel was going to try to bluff, he might just hang around to see if his 9's good.
Seiver fires 11-6. And remember, Daniel told Amanda earlier tonight that he's got a whole bunch of tricks in line for Scott Seiver.
A lot of the time, there's a lot of leveling going on between players. Daniel's obviously thinking a lot about this hand, but in this case, Scott Seiver's thought process is, me have top pair, me bet.
That Brown education's good for something.
These two have a lot of history on the big game.
Daniel calls.
I'm not sure what his plans are for this hand, but he's drawing pretty thin.
Third heart hits on the river.
It's also a 6, and that would have put a few suited connector-type hands in front of Scott on the river. And Daniel, who's called on every street, is likely to play any of those types of hands the same way.
Seiver bets 10-2.
By taking the offensive here, Scott has pretty much made what is a blocker bet, since it's less likely that Daniel would raise the river on a bluff than he would to fire a bluff if he were checked to. Daniel catching a pair in the turn really messed up his float plans because now he's got a decision. At least when you're bluffing with nothing, you know your hand is no good. Scott's bet is so small, it really doesn't look like a bluff, which could be leveling Daniel into thinking that it is.
Daniel calls.
King, queen.
You win. Good bet.
Seiver takes down a pot of nearly 56 grand.
And Scott Seiver continues poning Daniel Negreanu.
The big game is just heating up. More from Las Vegas coming your way after this. Welcome back to Las Vegas and the big game, where there's over $1.1 million on the table. 27-year-old amateur Bill Given has been staked 100 large to buy in and is dreaming of a big payday.
If I did well, I'd start my own business, a hobby pool poker kind of gaming shop, and definitely if I won a lot, I could get that going. Well, this is probably the only time I'm ever going to have a $100,000 bankroll. So it was my life savings. Obviously, I'm not doing this, but where it's a stake, I'm willing to lose it. But hopefully, the fact that I'll have that extra little bit of fearlessness because it's not mine, hopefully that'll give me an edge.
The bluff he tried to run against Daniel was pretty fearless, but you know who else was fearless? All those nameless red-shirted ensigns on Star Trek. And if he can't get that 36K back up, he won't be coming back with the rest of the away team.
Action on Seiver, A7.
Any damage is too much damage.
Raises to 1,200. Hachem folds, so does Daniel. Pocket fives for Galfond on the button. Calls.
Seiver started off pretty quiet, but he's got some chips in front of him now, and he's getting more active.
Jack 10 for the cannon, also in. Ace 8 suited for Doyle Brunson. Makes it a four-way pot.
A suited ace is a perfectly fine defend from the big blind.
9 deuce queen. Doyle flops a nut flush. Action on Given, who's open-ended and has a flush draw.
This is a horrible flop for Bill Given. He may think he has a strong draw, but any money he commits to this pot will be a donation to Doyle's hat fund.
Goes check, check, check to Galfond.
Doyle appears to be content to let others do the betting for him. If Phil thinks his fives might be best, it's the kind of hand that could use some protection on this board.
Galfond bets 2,600.
This normally would be a good spot to raise for the cannon. Personally, I know I'd get called by the ace of diamonds, which is beating me already, so I probably wouldn't stick it all in. Typically, Given would have a thin draw to a straight flush, but Joe Hachem folded the jack of diamonds.
$10.
Given raises to 10,000.
This raise looks awfully strong by the loose cannon, so whatever Doyle does here is going to look pretty strong too. But with the nuts, he probably doesn't want to chase everyone away. Right now, Doyle's just trying to figure out how to get the rest of Given's money, and hopefully someone else's too.
Doyle just calls. Seiver folds. So does Galfond. The turn makes Given a straight.
Well, this is just about the worst card ever for Bill Given.
All in.
He's all in. Doyle calls.
He's got the
I
nuts.
got the... Oh. I just straight. Good hand. I'm drawing dead. Good game, guys.
Good game, man.
It was fun.
Whoa, Canada. That's it for the cannon.
Dang, you hit the card and you didn't...
Yeah. Scott?
That was a
Bill, all the best, man.
Thanks.
You went out fighting at least.
Daniel?
yeah, definitely good game, Bill.
Phil? Good luck, guys.
You know what the Godfather says there? It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business. And with that last hand, Doyle is now up 55 dimes. Phil Galfond is down over 32 grand, but all the other pros are up and playing with the Loose Cannon's $100,000 stake.
There is a consolation prize for Bill. He gets one last chance to hang with Amanda.
Bill, do you think the downfall for you was the pot against Daniel?
Yeah, it definitely was. I was short stacked, and then on that last hand, I'm down to like 35. I had a small or a medium flush draw and an open ender. With 35, I'm kind of willing to get it all in right there.
Such a tough break.
That's it. Yeah.
You know, there's 17 bracelets at that table.
That is an amazing table right there. Great experience playing with these guys. Something I'll remember for the rest of my life. And I didn't play my best poker, maybe, but it was good. It was fun.
All right, well, we loved having you, okay?
Okay, thank you very much.
So we will continue with five-handed play for the time being.
I know someone's in the green room.
Don't give it away. Hachem gives that away. Daniel, ace deuce. Raises. King 8 for Galfond.
Not those.
Calls. Brunson folds. Seiver. Jack 10.
We should see at least a call here.
Yep, a call. 3 to the flop, which is 8 king ace. Bottom 2 for Phil, top pair for Daniel. Seiver checks his gut shot. Daniel bets 3,000.
Daniel raised pre-flop, so he's going to be betting here pretty often whether he has an ace or not. Phil may not want to chase him out.
Galfond just calls, and Seiver folds. The turn, 10 of hearts.
This board just got worse for both players.
Daniel checks.
Any two big cards now have some kind of hand or draw. In fact, the worst you can be doing right now with two cards bigger than an 8 is a gut shot. Neither player wants to see another big card come off.
Phil bets 7,000.
Unless Daniel pairs up on the river, his kicker will not play.
Daniel calls. The river, 6 of hearts. Daniel checks.
Even though Phil's got 2 pair, a lot of players would just check this behind, not wanting to get raised on this kind of board.
Nope, Galfond bets 15-5.
Phil's made a good read that his 2 pair are good, and this kind of value bet separates a really good player from an okay one.
I'm feeling a queen jack for sure. That's like, that would make sense. You have him queen jack. What else makes sense, Phil? Queen jack for sure makes sense. You know, float and hit straight, and then bet and bet. What else? Pocket 8s? Ace king. I don't think you do that with ace king. I don't think you do that with ace 10. Not really king 10. What the heck is it?
Phil's got Daniel's read all over the place.
Feels like queen jack or not queen jack, like nothing. But what nothing does he have?
Daniel's radar seems a little jammed.
I'm confused. Yeah, 15. What are you gonna show me? Queen jack? Or pocket 8s? Those both make sense. There's no draw here, which means you're more likely maybe to rep something. I've made worse calls.
Story checks out.
Queen jack pocket 8s, or I think I win. Queen jack pocket 8s, or I think I win. Okay, what the heck? Let's go.
Daniel calls.
King 8.
That works too. Yeah, that one I didn't have in your range, but it works too.
Yeah, I was thinking the whole time. See, it smells like King 8 to me.
That one was polarized.
No, see, it wasn't, because he had King 8.
Doyle learned a new word, and he's excited to use it.
Well, that hand left Daniel out in the cold, but Phil Galfond is just heating up. Don't go anywhere. We're going to fill that seat after this. To see all of this game's stats, unaired hands, and material deemed too hot for TV, just visit us online. The last hand, we saw Daniel talk himself into paying off a river bet from Phil Galfond. So what exactly was Phil thinking? Let's find out as we go behind the poker face.
All right, so this hand, Daniel opens in the cutoff to 1,200, and I decided to make a very loose call on the button with King 8 offsuit. Daniel and I are very, very deep. I think he has somewhere around 230,000, and I felt pretty comfortable being in position, making a lot of moves post-flop. So I was happy to see a flop in position and keep stacks relatively deep. And Scott called from the big blind. Flop was ace, king 8, so I flop bottom 2. Scott checks, Daniel bets 3,000. I don't think he's betting many kings or 8s or like pocket jacks or anything like that. So I think it's like an ace and then a lot of air. I'd rather call, either let him keep bluffing, or if he checks and I can read him as weak, bet and have him call me down. Scott folds, and the turn comes 10, still rainbow. The problem for me with this turn is that no draw missed. I realized at this point it was going to be really tough for me to get value from an ace unless Daniel gives me credit for being able to turn a hand like Jack 10 or Queen 10 into a bluff. Daniel checks, and I really felt like on this board, and given how call-y he kind of expects me to be, he would bet with a better 2 pair. I did think it was possible he was check raising with a big hand, but I thought most likely what would happen is he would check fold or check call with an ace. So I bet 7,000, and he calls. Daniel and I have played together a lot, and I think we know each other's games pretty well, and actually, in some ways, have kind of similar game. So I think that adds a lot of interesting layers, especially in this spot where it's a spot where I shouldn't ever be able to be bluffing, and the river is a 6 of hearts. Again, I thought it was a really tough spot to get more value. I fired out 15,500 and kind of just had to hope that he would give me enough credit to think I was bluffing there.
Feels like queen jack or not queen jack, like nothing. But what nothing does he have? Queen jack, pocket 8, so I think I win. Okay, what the heck? Let's go.
King 8.
That works too. Yeah, that one I didn't have in your range, but it works too.
And he did end up calling, and I won, so I guess it worked out.
Daniel looked Phil up on the river with a pair of aces for the price of my car, and Phil's response, guess it worked out.
Hey, Joe, tell us about who's in seat number 1.
Aaron Jones is a 23-year-old pro who hails from Indiana. He's made a name for himself as a poker player, a poker teacher, and a poker blogger. He's from Indiana, and his name is Jones. Come on, dude, where's the hat and the whip?
Yeah, I hear he's terrified of snakes as well.
Junior!
But that's, tougher for me to know when you're on the hand advance.
Action begins on Scott Seiver. I'm guessing he's folding. Yes.
Not even for Scott Seiver.
Hachem folds. Suited connectors for Daniel. Raises. Ace-10 for Galfond on the button.
This is pretty much an auto call. Maybe a 3-bet.
Option B. Jones. His first hand of the night. 9-8. Folds. Jacks for Doyle.
This is so unlike you. Did you not take your medication this morning?
Unlike him in what way?
Like every hand, 3-bet, 4-bet.
No, that's exactly like him. Well, who do you play with?
I've never seen him do that.
That's all I've ever seen him do.
Really?
That's a sign of a good player, right? One person thinks he's tight, one person thinks he's loose, one person thinks he's aggressive, one person thinks
Doyle calls.
Well said, poker blogger.
38 is the total, yeah?
Daniel's in.
Well, no, don't worry about that. Nobody thinks you're tight. Nobody thinks you're passive. So you don't have to worry about that.
3 to the flop.
See, even new people come to the game.
6-4-10, 2 diamonds. Doyle still best, even though Galfond hit top pair.
This is a pretty magical flop for Doyle. He's got the overpair to the board, and Galfond's got top. Not to mention, Daniel's double gutted.
Action on Brunson. Bets 9,200.
Doyle's just donk bet into 2 players, so it's probably pretty easy for Daniel to put him on top pair or better. But not only does Daniel have a strong draw, but it's big time disguised.
Daniel calls.
Galfond probably liked his hand a lot more before there was a donk bet and a call in front of him. He may still be confident in his hand, but his spidey senses are definitely tingling. I guess that would make Doyle Doc Ock.
Would that then make Daniel the Hobgoblin?
Actually, Hobgoblin was Green Goblin's son, so no, that makes no sense.
Okay, thank you. Phil calls. The turn, deuce of hearts.
This is a pretty good card for Doyle's hand since it's not an overcard. Although 3-5 just got there, and we know players like Daniel and Phil Galfond will play a hand like 3-5 from time to time.
Doyle slows down and checks.
With 2 callers on the flop, Doyle may want to keep this pot from getting out of control.
Daniel checks.
Now it goes check. Maybe Galfond's spidey senses are calming down a bit.
Still checks. Tray of hearts on the river.
This card is a brick for the players in the hand, but anyone who was holding a 5 would have just gotten there.
Doyle checks. Daniel checks.
Check.
Doyle shows and wins a pot of nearly 40 grand.
I was really hoping Phil had 10 deuce, though. Yeah. I really thought you might.
I really could have.
I know.
There's a reason they call it the Brunson, son.
Doyle adds to his stack and continues to be the most profitable player at the table.
No more of those hands. God, so frustrating.
Will Daniel's frustration continue? Find out after this. Welcome back to Las Vegas in the big game, where Doyle Brunson's up the most so far, followed by Joe Hachem and Scott Seiver.
Late comer to the game, Aaron Jones is down a bit, while Negreanu and Galfond are both at the bottom of the loss column, followed only by our loose cannon, who busted out and left behind his entire 100-grand stake.
Once again, he's Joe, I am Chris, and now that we've seen over half the hands this week, it's time to check in on the stats for the 5 players who've actually been here for the entire session. Joe?
Well, Chris, I know I sound like a broken record, but I just love looking at the VPIP, VPIP. As you can see, all of our players are within about 5% of each other, except our 2 quote-unquote internet players, Seiver and Galfond, who are playing 39% and 53% of the pots respectively. Let's take a closer look at Phil Galfond's numbers. And OMG, Phil Galfond has been by far the loosest and most aggressive player at the table, and he's wielding the biggest stack thanks to his $500,000 buy-in. His confidence is apparent. He's raising more hands than anyone else is even playing, raising every cutoff and button when it's folded to him, and when he gets to the flop, he's generally willing to stick around even when he's not the aggressor. Now, so far, all that aggression hasn't quite added up to a profit, but with Phil involved in so many big pots, he's just one monster away from the win column.
So, Joe, if the aggression isn't exactly working, how are the tight players faring this session?
Pretty well, actually. Let's look at some numbers for our 2 tightest players, Doyle and Joe. These guys are ranked lowest in almost every category except the one that counts the most, profit. They're first and second there. Doyle is up over $87,000 and Joe is up over 37 grand right now. With Scott and Phil playing so aggressively, Doyle and Joe don't feel the need to mix it up as much and are happy letting the younger players take the lead.
So, Joe, with the loose cannon now gone from the table, how do you see things progressing from here on out?
I think we've already begun to see signs that the table dynamic is changing. Now that there's no obvious soft spot, the target has to go on someone else's head. When there's someone in the game who doesn't play at the same level as the rest of the table, you have to play mostly straightforward against him or her to get value out of your hands. But when your opponents know how you play and can think on your level, things start to get very complicated, and that's when strategy and leveling come into play. Everyone in this game thinks they have an advantage over the rest of the table, and the wheels may just come off as these masterminds attempt to outdo each other.
So prepare to see a lot of high-end poker for the rest of this week. Poker purists, stay tuned. The action starts up again with hand 78 of our 150-hand session. Action on Joe Hachem.
Yeah.
With the Brunson.
I mean, I've never,
Folds.
believe me, I'm not focusing on this.
Queen 8 suited for Daniel. Raises. 5 tray. Galfond calls. Jack 10 suited for Jones. Calls on the button. Brunson folds. Seiver. Kings.
There's way too many people in this hand for kings, so I'd expect to see a 3-bet. Daniel announced to the table that he was frustrated. Playing more hands is one way to polarize your frustration level.
Raise pot.
Seiver re-raises. Daniel folds.
He always looks confused.
I don't think he is, though.
You're not confused, but you always look like you're confused.
It's contemplation. It's contemplation.
Just, no. I'm not trying to give, I think I probably just am confused. I'm not like reverse anything.
Galfond calls.
Bad players are confused, good players are thinking. And since Aaron Jones has been known to flame people online, I'm going to say he's also thinking. With Phil's call, he does have better immediate odds to get in there.
Jones calls.
Hot tea, decaf, one time.
Daniel running bad at drink service.
A little over 100.
7-5 Jack.
130 or so.
Thank you.
Jones hits top pair. Seiver still best.
This is a pretty awesome board for kings. No ace, no flush draw. Tough to be open-ended. And a continuation bet probably won't get much respect, Jack high.
Action on Seiver.
And for the cherry on top, everyone else caught a piece.
Bets 11-8.
Galfond folded bottom pair once at the beginning of the week, but in general, these guys do not like folding pairs.
And he won't fold this time. He calls.
They especially don't like folding top pair.
Jones is sticking around too.
Jones might like his hand. Top pair will be good a lot of the time, but there's no sense in a raise since Seiver's probably way ahead or way behind.
8 of spades on the turn gives Jones a gut shot. Seiver still best.
Now this is kind of a nightmare situation for Scott. He had 2 callers on the flop, and with this 8, almost all suited connectors have some kind of hand or draw. Go ahead and pause and test it if you like. So I would be really surprised if Scott did anything here other than bet.
There's a bet of 50,100.
Scott Seiver says checks are for the bank. Here we pay 50 dimes to draw.
Galfond closes his account.
Now, as you can see, Aaron's fold isn't so insta. He's got top pair and a gut shot, so right now he's trying to think of hands Scott would do this with that don't have him beat. Scott could be just barreling with ace-king, and it's also conceivable that Seiver could make this move with 10s or 9s once he picks up a gut shot draw on the turn. And lest you forget, Indiana here just showed up to this party. He may not be ready to open up the arc just yet.
Jones folds.
No face melting today.
What'd you have, Scott?
That was a pretty big sigh. You should have regulated your breathing on that one.
Scott should really come up with a sort of pose to try to hide that.
That's a great idea, Joe. Great idea. We got plenty more poker action when we return to Las Vegas and the big game. Welcome back to Las Vegas and the big game as we pick up the action on hand 84. Joe Hachem is straddled, so Daniel Negreanu will be the first to act. Jack 4. See ya. Galfond folds 6 high. 23-year-old Aaron Jones from Indiana looking at ace 10. Jones took over the seat, replacing our loose cannon, who got bounced earlier tonight. Makes it 2,500 to go. Brunson folds.
Bigger raises because of the straddle.
Seiver folds. The straddler calls.
Hashem's defend is a little loose, but he did have money in there from the straddle.
The flop. 8 king queen 2 spades.
He's the guy from, what's that movie? Napoleon Dynamite?
No.
You know the one.
Hachem checks top pair.
Do you ever get... Yeah, Doyle.
His name is Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah,
It would be Robert Duvall.
Jones bets.
Try to think of what actor would play you in a movie.
Robert Duvall would be quite a...
He would have been my first choice.
Robert Duvall and yours.
People used to tell me Owen Wilson.
Yeah, I can
He's
see
older
that.
than I am.
Hachem calls.
What are you then, not John Cusack?
I get Jason Biggs.
Yes.
Jason, yes, there you go, from American Pie.
Hachem checks. Top pair now for Jones.
And you know who I get?
Daniel Negreanu?
No, I get Edward Norton.
That's awesome, Worm, but in case you didn't notice, Hachem outflopped Jones, but Jones flopped a huge draw and caught up on the turn.
Jones bets 8,500.
Joe can't like this bet, but he also knows that the ace is a good card for Jones to bet no matter what.
But he's been dead quite a
For
while.
a long time.
I think it was probably because of the hat. He wore a hat.
Hachem calls.
This is turning into a classic example as to why a loose call pre-flop can get you into trouble.
4 clubs on the river. Hachem checks.
Hashem's played this pretty passively. If Jones is hesitating, he may feel this board is tough to value bet.
This is pretty close. I'm gonna check. I have an ace.
Of course you do.
Wow.
With some outs.
I think I was ever
There's
winning.
a lot of slow roll talk earlier. You better not be pulling it on me.
I think I was never winning the hand, even though I started off.
No, you weren't winning that.
I was never ever going to win this hand.
Unless you move in on the river.
Even if you win, you can't. What is it, Scott? God dang it, I messed it up.
Even if I miss, I
Even
can't
if I
miss.
miss, I can't miss.
That's from The Wire. It's not TV, it's the big game.
Such a sick opportunity for it too.
It's a great opportunity for it.
And here's a sick opportunity to see who's taken down their fair share of pots so far.
So sick. Daniel Negreanu, Aaron Jones, and our now departed loose cannon Bill Given have the smallest pieces of pie, while Hachem, Brunson, and Seiver have been getting well fed. Phil Galfond at 26% has had the most wins so far, but he hasn't won the big ones. He's stuck 54 dimes.
Cards are in the air. Straddle on. Galfond first to act. Raises with 8-7.
Galfond stuck. Looks like he's going to loosen up a little.
Jones folds. Brunson out. King-queen suited for Seiver.
So far, Seiver seems to like playing pots with Galfond. He's certainly not folding here.
You're right, he calls. Hachem folds. Daniel out.
If the percentages seem off, that's because Aaron and Daniel each folded an 8 and Doyle folded a 7.
2 to the flop, 4-8-4, top pair for Galfond.
Somehow he still managed to outflop Seiver, hitting the case 8.
Seiver checks.
Nailing top pair should make for an easy c-bet.
Galfond bets 4,000. Seiver calls.
Scott not willing to give up yet, wants to see another card.
Which is the deuce of hearts. Seiver checks.
This was a good card for Phil.
Galfond slows down. 4 of clubs, Galfond fills up on the river.
So only a 4 or an overpair are beating Phil.
Action on Seiver. He bets a whopping $400.
All right, well, Phil needs to treat this as a check, which means he can't ever fold. This bet is kind of a level because it's so bizarre it could mean everything or nothing. Phil's probably tempted to raise, in which case maybe Scott knows this and we'll see something ridiculous.
Galfond raises to 6,500.
By inducing the raise, Scott gets Phil to polarize his hand. He likely wouldn't raise something middle of the road like ace high, so he's either got a super strong hand or Scott's actually beating him. We know Scott's not beating him.
Seiver calls.
I have the 8.
That's the look of a man who just lost a $28,000 pot.
How much did he bet on the river?
What's that?
How much did he bet?
He bet 400. He bet the minimum.
That's a Viffer bet.
He's just missing the neck tattoo.
Bad river.
So the King High Hero call turns into a bad river declaration, and Galfond doesn't seem to mind either way. Will Scott Seiver ever tell the truth? There's only one way to find out. Come back. Welcome back to Las Vegas in the big game, and his hand 89 begins with a straddle.
Folks, remember, it's pot limit pre-flop, so the straddle definitely affects the pre-flop play and makes for some very bloated pots.
Action begins on Joe Hachem, King Jack.
It's so hard. Yeah, it's like a 2+2 thing.
You also need to be really deep.
Yeah, you need to be relatively deep.
And it's got to be like against me. It's got to be like against me.
Yeah.
Raises. Daniel folds.
What about the min-bet 3-bet?
Galfond out.
I just get the feeling that the trifecta is probably not going to happen, but...
Jones folds. 9-8 suited for Doyle. Calls. And now Seiver. Also suited. Not connected.
Well, we all know Scott Seiver has a very loose definition of suited connectors, and he's getting more than 3-1.
Seiver calls. 3 to the flop, which is King 10-10, top pair for Hachem. Brunson checks.
Seiver thinking about it with 6 high.
Doing more than thinking about it. He's acting out, firing 5,800.
Now, even though he wasn't first to act, this is still a donk bet. Scott's hoping no one hit this flop and he can just take it down right here. For Hachem, it's pretty tough to lay down top pair in this spot. very tough to put your opponent on flop trips, let alone if he did have trips, why wouldn't he let Hachem continuation bet at least one time? Since folding here to 1-bet isn't really a possibility, I guess Joe must be trying to decide between call or raise.
There's the raise to 15-5. Doyle folds.
This is a risky raise for Joe Hachem. If he thinks his opponent's bluffing, he should let Seiver keep firing. If Scott's got a 10 or a better king, there's a good chance he'll get 3-bet. Now, we know Scott's only got 6 high. What in the Seiver is going on here?
I'll tell you what's going on here. He re-raises to 42-5.
Scott Seiver has just bet $42,500 that Joe Hachem does not have a 10. In other words, that's not a knife. This is a knife. Seiver claims this pose keeps his opponents from getting a read on him. He definitely doesn't want to give anything away now. Joe Hachem has painted himself into a corner here, and he's likely to be thinking to himself, Aussie, 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 oi, oi, vey.
All right. Wow. I fold, pass. Nice one.
Wow. And Seiver shows.
Yeah.
Scott Seiver had the 6.
He was waiting for it. He was waiting for it. Nice hand, sir.
Yep, that feels good.
Seiver takes down a big pot, and that propels him into second place on our profit loss board.
Doyle is the leader, up over 77 grand. Aaron Jones and Joe Hachem are both still showing a small profit,
while Daniel and Phil are stuck, and of course, our loose cannon Bill Given was KO'd.
17 bracelets, $1.2 million on the table, poker legends, and some of the best internet kids currently playing in the game. Tomorrow night sounds like fun to me. I'm Amanda Leatherman saying goodbye for now, and remember, if you've got the cash and the guts, there's always a seat open at the big game. Good night, everybody.
For Joe Stapleton, I'm Chris Rose. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey.
How you guys doing?
Grinding. These guys are tough.
Do you think it looks like Phil Galfond always wants to laugh?
He looks like he's confused.
He always looks like he's confused.
Oh, who doesn't want to laugh? Laughing's fun.
Laughter is the best medicine.
The preceding was a presentation from PokerStars.com.